anyway, yeah, I don't know what the theme song. I don't know what the theme song for Bond is. So you smart guys, go ahead, tell me. Let me hear you hum a few bars.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk about.
Don't quit picking on my teacher.
That's right. So let's talk about this. We're going to use. This is going to be my example right here. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. So y'all keep your eyes on him. If he goes to sleep, somebody throw something at him, wake him up so he doesn't miss it.
Can we?
Travis he's going to take care of it. So, all right. So I want to put a little context in here so that we understand Daniel. Last week, we talked about the fiery furnace. So I'm going to talk about the lion's den, okay? So this is Daniel. So Daniel is born, now, these dates are approximate, so don't rush off and say, oh, Daniel was born in 620. Well, 620, give or take 2 years, okay? This is the best we can do, going back and looking at the records for this time period. So at 620, Daniel was born, at 620 BC, before Christ. At approximately 15 years old, or 605, Daniel, along with his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right, which we learned last week, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're taken to Babylon, where they are...
Got a question already.
I thought 620 would come after 605.
Okay, so what you have to understand... I apologize, we're not going to get through the entire lesson tonight. So
I know it goes backwards.
It goes backwards before Christ. It counts down to Christ, then counts up.
Yeah.
Remember, there are no stupid questions. No, I'm not going to.
Just stupid answers.
I was going to go with questioner, but we'll go with that. So yeah, so it counts down to 0, right? And that's where it flips over. So at 620, Daniel's born, 605 roughly, when he's 15 years old-ish. They're taken to Babylon. This was a common... Scared me there a minute, brother. I thought you was raising your hand. I was going like, I'm never going to get through this. They'll keep getting questions.
Don't blame it on us.
Huh?
Don't blame it on us.
Well, no, you keep raising your hands. It distracts me. Squirrel. Where they're ordered to learn Babylonian culture. This was common, particularly in the Babylonian culture. They would take youngsters, particularly from the finer families, and bring them in, and it helped diversify their culture, but it also meant that, you might have somebody born in the country living right next to somebody born and then moved in from another country, right? So it was hard to put together a revolt, although that did happen. About 602, or about when he was 18, Daniel and his three friends complete their 3 years of learning. So they were, think of it this way, they were stolen or kidnapped or taken hostage, carried off to Babylon, and then they went through college. They were given a lot of education. Education on the culture, education in math, in politics, all kinds of things, okay? About 586 BC, when he was roughly 33 to 34 years old, Jerusalem's walls break and the Babylonians destroy Jerusalem, setting fire to the temple and the palace. Nebuchadnezzar, the same year, Nebuchadnezzar makes a golden statue, orders everyone to worship it or be thrown into the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse to pay homage to the golden statue. They're confronted. And, of course, we've got the whole fiery furnace story, okay? So Daniel is about 33. I found it interesting that when Daniel was approximately 33 years old, the temple was destroyed. Things that make you go, When Jesus was 33 years old, the temple was destroyed. Remember what he said? He said, you'll tear down this temple, but I will build it back. And he was talking about himself. And so I find it quite interesting that Daniel, a lot of his prophecies are apocalyptic, Son of Man prophecies. And there's this parallel that kind of I don't have any deeper meaning to it other than to go, okay? So we have that. I'm just checking for questions, so I just want to make sure you guys have got me spooked now. Okay. All right, so as we keep going, so in 556, Nebuchadnezzar dies. Okay, he's replaced by a succession of short-lived kings. If you look, when Nebuchadnezzar dies, I think his son is one of the kings a couple of years, and then it's a son-in-law, then it's a brother or an uncle. So there's 3 or 4 or 5 kings, all just bang, 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 right? 556, Nabonidus becomes king of Babylon. And of course, like I said, Daniel is 64 years old, approximately. The next bullet we have at 71, which is 553 to 549. Sometime during there, Nabonidus appoints his son, Belshazzar, as his co-regent. Okay, so somewhere in there, Nabonidus, spent a lot of time abroad, and nobody's really quite sure why. But he left his son there in charge in the city. All right, so there was a king on the throne while the king was roaming the countryside for whatever reasons. In 539, so at approximately 81 years old, Belshazzar holds a great feast and uses the holy vessels taken from Jerusalem. Now, in case you've ever wondered, if you read that story, what this signified was he decided to hold a festival, right? The city was under siege at this time because if you've ever read the story, the handwriting on the wall, well, he had a great feast to try to boost morale in the city. They felt like the city was so impervious that they would never get into the city, and his father would come back with the army and rescue him. So he thought he would distract the people. Look, I know the barbarians are at the gates, but don't worry, our gods will protect us. And they took out of the treasury all of the trophies from the countries that they had conquered. Things that were sacred to those cultures, and said, see, we spit on their deities, right? We've defeated greater than what is at our gates. During the party, he sees the fingers on a hand and it's writing on the wall. And he didn't know what it means. And so his wife is like, call Daniel. Daniel is a guy that your fathers or your uncles, the other kings have used to interpret this kind of stuff. And Daniel walked in, and there's one set of theological thought that believes that there wasn't anything special about the writing. It was ancient Hebrew, which Daniel knew cold, right? But the Chaldeans or the Babylonians didn't recognize, right? But the point there is that he sees the hand writing on the wall, and the writing on the wall has said, I've weighed you, I've judged you, found you lacking, tonight you die, right? And so, as it turns out, the next king in succession, Cyrus, He storms the city that night, actually kind of walks in, sneaks in, and he kills Belshazzar, and he becomes the emperor of Persia and Babylon. Daniel is 81 years old at this point. And this is where my example comes in. I just want to give you an idea, right? How you're...
I'll be 82 next week.
He'll be 82. So Daniel is not, and I only do this to show, Daniel, we read these stories and we read them in a little bit of a vacuum, right? That's why I wanted to put these slides up. I wanted to give you some context as to what Daniel has lived a long and full life. You'll notice we haven't got to the lion's den yet. Okay? And Daniel has already lived through approximately 5 kings, 6 emperors. He's managed to survive being appreciated and valued by each one in succession. Now Cyrus comes in. He appoints Darius the Mede, not to be confused with Darius the Great, some future kings of Persia. They think perhaps this Darius was a guy named Gobryas, and Gobryas was appointed as a viceroy or sub-king of Babylon. Okay, and that's why you see at this part in the book of Daniel, you'll see both Cyrus and Darius mentioned almost interchangeably. One was the king, one was his governor, if you will, because remember Cyrus was a Persian. So he went back to Persia and he left Darius the Mede in charge of Babylon. At least that's the common thinking. And so he's 81 years old when this happens. The next year, with Darius the Mede in charge, is when he ends up, and we're going to read that story tonight. That's when he ends up in the lion's den. He is approximately 82 to 83 years old. Okay? Daniel is not a young man. He is a man, as we see in the very next bullet, near the end of his life. He dies at approximately 84 years old. So just a couple of years later, and Daniel has passed away. So the lion's den, which is a very, where everybody grows up knowing, it's taught in every Sunday school in church, right? Daniel in the lion's den. And if we think of Daniel as being older at all, we picture him, or at least I did, we picture him 50s, 60s, still a relatively young person. But he was in his 80s at this time. Yes, sir?
How do you see pictures of as early 20s or 30s?
Yeah. So in 30s is when the fiery furnace happened.
Yeah.
Now, he wasn't there, but his friends would have been the same age with him, right? So he was in his 80s, okay? And that's going to bring us to our story, right? He's in his 80s when we get to the story. Daniel is estimated to be in his early to mid 80s, 82 to 85. It's dependent. Remember, we got a 2-year. Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't that seem sort of young even then to die at that age? Because most people die, they would live quite an age, over 100 years or so.
By the time we get to 600 BC, the lifespan of human beings had come down dramatically.
Yeah.
We are well beyond the days of Abraham. Abraham lived to be 140. And for Abraham's generation, that was considered to be very long-lived. And so the lifespans have come down very dramatically at this point. So
Methuselah lived until, 800?
that was before the flood. But yes, he was 969 years old.
900.
Okay? It was not uncommon before the flood, before the flood, to live 700, 800, 900 years old. After the flood, it's dramatically different. Noah lived to be 600 and some odd years. I think Shem lived to be 500. Now, just to give you an idea, okay, and one day I'll bring some charts up and we'll look at them. Adam lived 900 and some odd years. Not as long as Methuselah, but almost. Adam lived long enough to have, let me make sure I get this right. It was Methuselah, bounced Methuselah on his knee as a baby. I believe it was either Methuselah or Methuselah's papa. It may have been Methuselah's daddy. He had Methuselah's daddy on his knee before he died. Methuselah would have heard these stories. Methuselah lived long enough. He died the year before the flood. Okay? So these people weren't living and dying completely. We think in terms of what we know today, right? We typically don't know, we don't know our great-grandparents. Okay? For sure, we don't know our great-great-grandparents. Right? But in these days, you knew your great, up to 8 generations. You knew back then. Methuselah would have been able to tell Noah, I heard the stories about Adam from my daddy. All right? Shem, Noah's oldest son, after the flood, took up residence, it is believed, in what is now the area we call Jerusalem in Israel, and Abraham paid him a tithe after the slaughter of the kings in the valley of Shalimar. Okay? Abraham, growing up as a child, would have known Noah. Right? Noah was still alive when Abraham was a child. Huh?
What a village.
What a village, yeah. Now, I don't know that Noah lived where Abraham did, right? Noah still could have been up around the mountain that Ararat. That doesn't tell us where Noah went to live. But their lifespans were certainly long enough still that we have several generations that could interact. However, because the flood is believed to have dramatically changed not only the climate, but there are some anthropological people who study geology from the past. They believe that the Earth, not archaeologists, but geologists,
What?
anthropologists, yeah, that study culture and geology. They believe that the Earth was rotating on a 0-degree axis. Okay, so everybody's seen a picture of the Earth?
Yeah.
Like you get a globe, right? And it's like this, right? It's on a 12-degree, I think. I can't remember, but it's tipped over a little bit, right? It's tipped over a little bit, and you know what that does for us, right? It creates the seasons. Very good. So there's a school of thought. I know, right? I'm a little dizzy here trying to remember all this from school. So if it was at 0, what does that mean?
No season.
No seasons. Whatever it was like all year round. Okay? And so when the flood happened, and they believe that the continents, it was all one large continent, right? Not 7 like we have today. And that when the flood happened, all that weight, all that water, all that upheaval, that's what split everything. In 1 year period of time, you had continents sinking, you had all the water coming up from out from under them, all the water in the atmosphere crashing down, and it created all this upheaval, right? And it was so dramatic that it tilted the earth. Now, There are some other things that they think, so that there was a difference in oxygen content after the flood than before, a difference in UV penetration after the flood as before, and that seems to be evidenced by the fact that the earth could no longer support what they call megafauna, right? And that is really large critters. Dinosaurs, right? One of the things that I've heard is that you look at all of the dinosaurs. Let's just pick Brontosaurus for a moment. You look at Brontosaurus, how big they were, right? But when they look at their nasal passages and their lungs, they weren't much bigger than an elephant. So, has anybody ever been to higher elevations? You know, like the mountains? You get up in the mountains. What is one of the things that you have trouble doing?
Breathing,
Why?
air thinner.
Thank you. The oxygen content is much lower. And so what do you end up doing? Right? You can't walk upstairs. You can't walk, period. Right? You try to walk and pretty soon you're like, oh my gosh. Oh. So now think about this. So how can a dinosaur live if he can't get air? So if the oxygen content changed, it suddenly doesn't have the lung capacity, the ability to bring in enough air in order to be functional, right? So this all seems to fit now, doesn't it? Right? Well, what else happens? How many of y'all remember, I can't remember her name, but the little girl who fell down a well and was trapped there for 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 days?
Yeah.
You remember that?
1986.
1980s.
19.
You remember it like it was yesterday.
Well, Holly was born that year. It was my close.
Okay, so you immediately related, my little girl, my baby. All right, so she was this little girl fell down a well, and I'm definitely not getting finished with this story tonight. This little girl fell down a well. So it was a piece of pipe that was not much bigger around than she was. So I mean, it wasn't like a water well, but and she fell down this pipe. She was down 30 or 40 feet, if I remember, something like that. And they couldn't get to her because all the big, strong men who might rescue her were too big to go down the pipe. And she was trapped, and it turns out she had one leg pinned up in, and what they had to do was drill or dig a diagonal shaft down and cut the pipe below her and then reach up and bring her out. But you remember they did, I think it was like 3 days or something. And they brought her out. Oh, everybody was ecstatic. The one leg that was pinned up against the pipe that had wedged her in was completely black when they brought her out. And doctors first diagnosed that we're going to have to cut the leg off. She's going to lose her leg. She's alive. She's going to live, but she's going to lose the leg. Okay? It was completely black. Circulation had been gone for 2 days or 3 days, 2.5 days, whatever it was. And we're going to have to cut the leg off. And they rushed her, of course, they rushed her to a hospital, and there was a doctor who came to the hospital. And he said, no, don't cut the leg off. Because he had a new treatment protocol. And he stuck her in a 100% oxygen environment, right? They got a name for it now, right? They use it for athletes, and but back then it was kind of unheard of. And he stuck her in a 100% oxygen environment, and within 48 hours, her leg had pinked right back up. She lost a little piece of one toe. That's the only thing that didn't come back. All that oxygen put the body's immune system and health recovery, right? It's like it put it on steroids. Now, you think back. So before the flood, if the oxygen content was higher, as they have surmised, right, as they guessed, you can do a lot of different things. You can have much bigger animals because you get more oxygen in through. People would not grow old as fast because that oxygen would like supercharge them.
But, well, one thing that you mentioned before that you believe before the flood, everything was flat. There were no mountains. And
Correct.
Any valleys or anything
Correct.
like that. Everything was the same level.
Everything was the same level
So
because
you
the
didn't
violence.
You didn't have to worry about any of the air.
Right, the air density didn't change because and geologists will tell you the mountains were formed by violence. But they claim, oh, but it took millions and millions and millions of years. That's not really violent. It happened in a year period of time, right? And that's why you see things like the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon, if you listen to geologists talk, geologists will tell you the Grand Canyon was not formed over hundreds and thousands of years. That is a sudden, violent off-rushing of water. Right? Now they're talking about, well, there was a glacier and the glacier dam broke and that water ran. Well, yeah, maybe. But maybe it was something else, okay? So we've chased that rabbit just about as far as we can. So the thing is, though, as far as ages are related, right? Before the flood, we had a lot longer lives. There was, by evidence of the fact that people no longer lived as long, there was some change to the environment that was drastic. And you see, if you look at ages starting with Noah, you see those ages coming down rapidly until we have basically 70, 80, 90 years. Okay? Does that help you out? Okay.
Yeah. That's about their ages.
So Daniel is estimated to be in his mid-80s. And that is, even by today's standards, a full life. Okay? He was taken from Israel by Nebuchadnezzar when he was in his late teens. He's had nearly 70 years of service now to foreign kings away from his homeland. He has served by this time approximately 5 kings, depends on how you count, one right after the other. And note that a conquering king or a king who is taking over does not typically keep the wise men or the advisors to the old king. Like, I beat you in battle, why would I keep your advisors? Obviously, your advice isn't much good, okay? But Daniel has always been kept on. And most of the time, he ended up with a promotion. So even though Daniel was separated from his family, from his homeland, from his religion, he never allowed, from his religious culture, let me say, he never allowed himself to become separated from God. All right? And that will feature prominently in our story. Okay, so finally, and at long last, and the crowd went wild. Thank you. Thank you. Let's read our text here today. So Daniel chapter 6, if you have your Bibles with you, I have it on the board. It's out of the New Living Translation. So Darius the Mede. Now here I talked a little bit about this. Cyrus conquered the city, but he left Darius the Mede as the viceroy or the sub-king. Well, he may have been a destroyer king or a battle king, but he was a viceroy, is what they call it. But he was in charge. So he decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces. He appointed a high officer to rule over each province. The king also chose Daniel, and now he's in his 80s. Okay? He chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interest. So he set up 120 counties, if you will. He put a county judge in each one of them and said, okay, you take care of this province, this county. Okay, you call them governors, 120 states. They each had a governor. And then he set up 3 men. He said, all you governors will answer to these 3 men. they're going to protect my interest. Okay? Because he was too busy to handle all that stuff. He had 3 guys do that for him. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. So he was like, that Daniel, he's sharp. He said, I'm going to make everybody answer to him. So remember, there's 3 of them, and they're equals, right? And so Daniel, he kind of stands out, and the king said, so I'm going to put him in charge of everybody. So you can imagine what happens next. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs. Because if you can't win by honesty, right? You gotta harpoon him. But they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. You know, I found it interesting that Sunday, if you remember, Sunday, Brother Shannon talked about Barnabas. And what is it they said about Barnabas? He was a good man. He was a moral man, right? Those descriptors have been applied to Christians, to believers in God, since the time before Daniel. Daniel, we see this happening here. They got together and they said, we have to stop this guy. Let's see if he's taking bribes. Let's see if he's stealing, if he's embezzling, right? Taking money off the top. They couldn't find anything that they could use to slow Daniel down. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So Daniel has no criminal history. He couldn't be accused of any crimes. There was no greed, no anger, no vengefulness, no disloyalty, no brutality, no theft. And because Daniel was a eunuch, there was no hanky-panky in the red light district in Babylon. I'm sorry. I tried to be as polite as possible. How many of y'all are watching? How many of y'all even aware of the circus going on in Washington, D.C. right now? Okay,
I'm watching every bit of it.
Yeah. Some of us are bored, more bored than others. Right? One of the things that they're using, and this happens every time there's a Supreme Court justice that comes up, all of the cabinet picks, what are they looking for? You drank. You're a drinker. You, as a matter of fact, the Secretary of Defense, right? One of the senators. You fooled around on your wife. Right? They couldn't find any of that against Daniel. Right? No drinking, no anger, no theft, none of that. I do like what our prospective defense secretary said. He said, I'm saved by, what was it, by God, by Jesus, and by Jenny.
Yeah.
And Jenny was his wife, right? And I thought, that man will go far.
I was just thinking, why do all these accusations going against these nominees and everything? Why would one of them turn and say, well, those without sin, let them cast the first stone.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, which one of you could stand up to this groom? Okay, so the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. We are all in agreement. Oh boy. We are all in agreement. We administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors. Now, they didn't have time to go to 120 locations around the country and get everybody to sign on to this thing. So we know they're doing what? Lying through their teeth. Okay? that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced, give orders that for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, you're the exception, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. All right? So basically, they said, hey, we think it's a good idea. It's something that we need to do to reinforce Babylonian culture. Okay? And when it says pray to either God or humans, they were including as humans, not that somebody would be praying to a human, but they were including any and all of the priestly duties for any and all of the religions. All right, that's what they were doing. So, King Darius signed the law, but when Daniel learned the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual, very important, in his upstairs room with his windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. All right, so one of the things I want to point out is these guys knew exactly how to entrap Daniel. What does that mean? They've been watching him. What else does it mean? There was something to see. Daniel did not hide his faith. Right? Have you ever heard the expression, if they came and arrested you for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you in a court of law? Right? For Daniel, there was. He was a believer. Now, something else here too, he not only was he a believer, but he did not hide it. He did not try to keep it under wraps, okay? Let's look at this. First note, let's note this here. Don't be a Darius, right? Note the flattery. Long live the king, right? When someone starts to butter you up, right?
They're trying to cook you.
They're trying to cook you, right? Right? Jesus did not say if a man tries to butter you on one cheek, turn to him also the other, right? I'm sorry, I took a little license there. But beware of flattery. They're signaling their virtue. Hey, have you ever been in a room or been talking with a person who begin to tell you how virtuous they are? Now, they typically don't say, oh, I'm a really good and virtuous person. They begin to tell you about the virtuous things that they have done, or to tell you how you should be more like them because they do this and such, right? And so we see this, right? They want a law strictly enforced. They're bragging about their loyalty. They immediately provide an exception for the king, right? If someone's trying to get you to do something that they're immediately saying, oh, but this wouldn't apply to you, beware, okay? Beware of folks who flatter you, attempt to get you to exempt yourself from the rules. Proverbs chapter 26, 24 through 28 says this, he that hates disguises it with his lips and lays up deceit within him. When he speaks fair, believe him not. There are 7 abominations in his heart, whose hatred is covered by deceit. His wickedness shall be showed before the whole congregation. Whoso digs a pit shall fall therein, and he that rolls a stone, it will return upon him. A lying tongue hates those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Okay? If you try to trap someone through deceit, through flattery and deceit, you will fall into the same trap you have laid. How many of y'all have heard the expression, hung as high as Haman? No? Well, you should read Esther. Then you would know that expression, right? Haman went to great lengths to set a trap for a guy named Mordecai. It's in the book of Esther. And he ended up hung in his own gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. So here we see that Darius is being set up, okay? through flattery. Proverbs 29:5 also says, a man that flatters his neighbor spreads a net for his feet. Not the neighbor's feet, for his own feet. He's setting his own trap. Don't be a flatterer. Now, listen, I'm a firm believer that if somebody deserves praise, praise them. Don't flatter them. What's the difference between praise and flattery? Oh, okay. She was, and I'm like, oh, I'm missing something. So what's the difference between praise and flattery?
Praise comes from the heart.
Oh, that's good.
Flattery is just
It's all
trying to get on the good side.
Right. He that hates disguises it with his lips, right? Flattery comes from here. Praise comes from here. I could use one word. When I say it, you go, oh, yeah, that's right. The one word is hypocrisy. A hypocrite, right? Flattery is something someone uses, but they don't believe it. Praise is genuine from the heart, right? I believe it. I honestly think this about you, okay? The next thing here, and we talked a little bit about this, Daniel was not a secret worshiper of God. These men knew about his faith. It was on display for everyone to see. Also, he did not begin to pray when it became outlawed. He did what he'd always done. It was his habit to pray. If you go back into Deuteronomy and also into Proverbs, and some of the stories in Kings, when Solomon dedicated the temple, there was a lot of writing about praying toward Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the temple, was the focal point of the religion, the Jewish religion. Okay? Now, Jesus changed that. The focal point of religion, the focal point of faith, let's put it that way. The focal point of faith moved from the temple in Jerusalem to the temple that Jesus occupied. Right? Jesus now lives in this temple. And so no matter where we are, no matter which way we face God. Okay? That's the lesson there. Okay? So, picking up our story, verse 11, then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking for God's help. An obvious infraction of the law. And so they went straight to the king. They made a beeline, right? And reminded him about his law. Now, note the way they approach this. They tell the king, did you not sign a law for the next 30 days? Like they don't know. I'm a little fuzzy on this law we signed yesterday, King. Didn't it say that we can't pray to anybody but you? He prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into a den of lions? Why, yes, the king replied, and that decision stands. It is an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. Okay, so once we make the law, we're stuck with the law. Because the law is the law. Then they told the king. Now, I love the phrasing here. That man, Daniel. Now remember when we talked about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right? Remember how they accused them? Those Jews that you put in charge over us, they don't respect you, right? We see the same thing happening again. That man, Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, that Jew, they use it as if it's a bad thing. Well, guess what? I saw a headline today that there are over 380 separate instances in various countries around the world, I think is what it was, of persecution against Christians. And they use Christians as a pejorative, as a slur, as an insult. That Christian, right? That's what they're doing here. It hadn't changed. is ignoring you and your law. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. Hearing this, the king was deeply troubled. Now remember, we put this in context. How long had this king known Daniel? Not very long. A couple of years, maybe 3, 4, max. And in that time, he has become very respectful, very fond of, very connected to Daniel. Okay? He was deeply troubled. He tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. All right? So if you think about it this way, they get up, the most probable scenario here is they get up and they go to Daniel's house. They catch him about mid-morning and they start watching him. He gets down for his noon prayers and they run to the king. And so the king only has about 6 hours till sundown or so. And so he's trying to save Daniel. He's trying to figure out a way out of it. Where's the loophole? Where's the loophole? Okay? That's what he's doing. But in the evening, uh-oh, hit the wrong button maybe? What did I do? There we go. Okay. So in the evening, there we go. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, Your Majesty, you know that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no law that the king signs can be changed. So the king here, he's a prisoner of his own words. He can't change a law that he signed. He's got to go through with it. And so at last, the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles, so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment. No dancing girls. Okay? He refused his usual entertainment. No Monday night football. Okay? No Monday night football. And he couldn't sleep at all that night. So, the trap is sprung. The king now realizes he's been made a fool of. Get up there. Okay. He's been made a fool of. Right? He's trapped. He can't get out. And it drives him nuts. He spends all day searching the archives, searching for some precedent. But notice what he says to Daniel, right? When he's trapped and he can't do it, he's got to go through with it. He says, May the God that you serve, what? So faithfully. Again, Daniel had not made a secret of his faith. In fact, in 3 or 4 short years, as opposed to 3 or 4 long years, okay, in 3 or 4 short years, Daniel had impressed this king. He had impressed him with his faithfulness, not only to the king, but to his God. Okay? One of the things that honest people, whether they're believers or not, honest people realize is that true believers in God will be better workers, neighbors, and companions than those who are not. And they know this, they learn this because they realize that our fealty, our faithfulness, our loyalty is to a righteous power, a power more righteous than we are. So we're constantly striving to be better than we are. Right? I want to be better this evening than I was this morning. I want to be better tomorrow than I was today. And that's what the king is acknowledging, that Daniel doesn't live by Daniel's code. And he doesn't live by the king's code. He lives by God's code. A code that cannot change, okay, or that does not change. All right, so the king realizes he's been made a fool of, right? So keep this in mind, because as we get into the tail end of the story, this is going to become a great motivator, okay? It's going to explain some things. There's a stone set to seal the mouth of the den. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. A stone sealed by the imperium seal. No one shall roll away this stone, right? Now, the lion's den, it's not like, and this is a lot of times what we have. We think, okay, they picked Daniel up and they tossed him off into a pit, right? Hey, Daniel was 80 some odd years old, you know? I mean, come on. No, there was you walk down into this pit, this hole, if you will, and they rolled this away so you couldn't get out, and then they probably opened some doors or gates to let the lions into that area, okay? So they put Daniel in there, they sealed it all up, and they turned the lions loose. Now, the other thing is, when you got thrown into a lion's den, okay, and it always shows male lions. But anyway, you didn't get thrown into a lion's den where, you were just the next regular meal. Those lions hadn't eaten in a while. They made sure that those lions were going to be ferociously hungry, right? They were going to be kind of Tony the Tiger hungry. They're going to look at whatever got thrown down into them and go, oh, it's great, right? Chomp, 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 okay? Now, also, note this. The king refuses all distractions. It says entertainments, right? No one comes to tell him stories. No one plays music for him, right? No dancing, no distractions of any kind. He suffers with and for Daniel. He's in agony all night. Now, I don't want to go too far with this, but this is the thought that I had. There's a stone on a tomb, and the faithful is in the tomb, facing the lions. And the man who has assumed responsibility, the king, is in agony, waiting. Do we not see Jesus and his Father? The Father in heaven in agony, waiting for his Son who is facing the lions in hell, waiting to see, right? So I see a lot of shadow here. Jesus, when he stood above the town of Jerusalem, it says he wept. Why? He said, because you've missed the day of your visitation. All of these hints and these clues throughout and listen, as Gentile, as someone outside of the Jewish culture, I don't see it all. Right? If you talk to somebody who is within the Jewish culture, who has come to know Christ, they will have revelation upon revelation. Oh, that verse? Let me explain what that verse means in the culture, right? And you'll go, oh, that's Jesus right there. And they'll be like, I know, right? But I see all this shadow. Jesus was like, I tried to tell you. I've hinted. I've given you clues. And you've missed it. You've missed it. So the king refuses all distraction. He suffers with Daniel. He's in anguish, hoping that Daniel is right about his God, right? Because my God can deliver me. But he's afraid that it's just another myth, right? He doesn't have yet the foundation of faith that Daniel has. Very early, I might be able to get through this. Jennifer might be mad at me. Very early the next morning, the king got up, hurried out to the lions. Very unkingly behavior. Very unkingly behavior. Hurried out to the lion's den. Normally the king would do what? The king would tell his butler, hey, go out and check on Daniel, will you? Tell me how many pieces he's in. No, the king went personally. He threw himself on the stone. When he got there, he called out in anguish. He threw himself on the stone as one mourning at a graveside. How many people, unbelievers, would come to your graveside and mourn you, right? Because of your example to them. This is an incredible witness, right? Daniel, servant of the living God. This from an unbeliever. Was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, here we go again, able to rescue you from the lions? Now, he really doesn't expect an answer because he's a man of the world. He knows what he knows. But what he's about to be shown is that while with man it may be impossible, with God all things are possible. Daniel answered, "Long live the king." I can just see this king, tears streaming down his face, and he hears those words, and his heart, has your heart ever leapt for joy? Right? When you realize that the worst you feared has been turned away from you. Long live the king, my God. We could stop right there. That'll preach. My God sent the angel to shut the lion's mouth so they would not hurt me. I have been found innocent in his sight. Oh, and by the way, I have not wronged you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed. He couldn't get that stone off that lion's den fast enough. They lifted him from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he trusted in his God. Notice once again that the king recognizes Daniel's life of faith. We see a rebuke, but it's a very gentle rebuke. Why? Because a man of faith, the Christian, does not hold a grudge. There's no malice. There's no unforgiveness. The king was forgiven. Daniel knew there was much more in play here, right? Just like his three friends, right? I don't have to be careful. I know how to answer this. He may not deliver me, but he is able to deliver me. I will not fear you, right? We see the gentle rebuke, I have not wronged you. I was found innocent in God's sight. Now note that the lion's mouths were shut. You notice he said that. He didn't say that the angel came and protected me from roaring lions. He said the angel came and shut their mouths. Right? They were not able to smear or to lie or to growl or to roar. They were not able to intimidate him in any way. The angels shut their mouths. Shut their mouths. When we go into the lion's den, right, and that old devil, that lion, tries to smear us, the angel is there to shut his mouth. He said the angel has shut their mouths. Now, no one was with Daniel or looked into the den that night, but Daniel confirms by saying the angel was there, that just like his three friends some 50 years before, just like them, he did not walk through the valley of the shadow of death alone. I wonder if someone had been able to look into that lion's den, would they have said, didn't we throw just one? But now I see two, and one looks like the Son of God. Deuteronomy 3:16 says, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. And when I looked this verse up, I picked Deuteronomy, right? But it's repeated again and again and again, all throughout the Old Testament. Do not be afraid, because God is with you. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Okay? Finishing up the story, the king gave orders to arrest the men who maliciously accused David. It is not good to make a fool of the king. Okay? He had them thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and their children. And the lions, look at this, leaped on them and tore them apart before they even hit the floor of the den. They were hungry. They was denied that little morsel called Daniel, and they were like, oh, but look, here's some Babylonians. Okay? How do you like your Babylonian, Leo? I like my Babylonian well done. Thank you.
It almost sounds like
Okay. And then King Darius, get this. Check this out. King Darius sent this message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world. Peace and prosperity to you. I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom shall tremble with fear before the God of Daniel. What a witness. For he is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. His rule will never end. This sounds like Nebuchadnezzar some 60 years before. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Okay? Like his three friends, if there was ever someone who had cause to complain, it was Daniel. Stolen from home at 15, renamed to honor a false god, being reminded that every time his name was used, instead of being called God is my judge, Daniel, being called at every turn, Bel protects his life. Belshazzar, that was his name. Bel protects his life. So he was literally named God is my judge, and they changed it to some false god. And every time somebody addressed him, it was like an insult, right? He was made a eunuch. You guys, I'll just leave that for y'all. He was made a eunuch. Oops, went too fast. And now, after having remained faithful in a heathen culture for 70 years, given that blasphemous name, having his ability to have children robbed from him, he was rewarded by being condemned to the lion's den. If ever there was someone who had cause to complain, to turn his back on God, we get so upset. People don't call us, son of the devil. You son of the devil. Right? Oh, I'm so offended. That happened to Daniel every day. But he remained faithful to his God. Right? He was robbed of what he thought life should be, but he remained faithful to his God. We walk in the back and somebody says, I can't believe you wore that. What is the matter with you? Right? That's it. I'll never set foot in church again. I'll show them. Daniel suffered all kinds of indignities, humiliations. He remained faithful to God. I will serve God. Okay? At 80 plus years old, Daniel was still teaching kings about God. Now, he taught Nebuchadnezzar so many years before. Now he's teaching another king. And he's doing it, like what's attributed to St. Augustine, right? Witness to everyone you meet. When necessary, use your words. He was still proving what faith in God could do. At 80 years old, 80 plus, he was still proving what God could do. Okay? He was in charge of the wise men, or the magi, of the kingdom. Now, he had been in charge of them for several decades by this point, and it is thought that his foundation of faith, taught to these wise men, was handed down generation to generation until a certain night, a silent night, a holy night, when a star shone brightly in the western sky. Because where do you think those 3 wise men came from? Sometimes God uses the faithful to prepare for things years in advance. Where did you go? I got one more.
You
Just too quick.
Yep.
I guess I did.
That's it.
Yeah, go.
Here we go. This is quick. Quick. Yeah, this is your review. Come on, I got one more slide. I want one more slide.
That's it.
1920.
I hope it's still there.
Right there.
Ha! Devil was trying to steal my slide. Psalms 92, 12 through 15. But the godly will flourish like palm trees and grow strong like the cedars of Lebanon, for they are transplanted to the Lord's own house. Didn't matter where Daniel was. He was in God's house, wherever he was. They flourish in the courts of our God. Get this. Even in old age, they will still produce fruit. They will remain vital and green. They will declare, the Lord is just. He is my rock. There is no evil in him. Age does not diminish our witness. Age should not diminish our faith. Age simply makes our witness more valid, more poignant, more meaningful, because we have all that history to show what faith in God can do. And that's the end. Okay. So, all right. So, see, I did get through it, and we chased a rabbit to boot. But y'all protect me now when Jennifer comes after me. Y'all got